Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At Home with Holmes. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Out of the array of degeneracy that the internet has to offer, you decided not to be a degenerate today and join us in our episode and intellectual journey with a very special guest that we are both very excited to have on. And she emphasizes the importance of not just experiencing, but also sharing beauty, and more specifically, the beauty that doesn't always get noticed, which is the beauty that's right in front of you. And so I can't think of a better group of people who not only manage to accomplish, but continue to embody the exact essence of that message than today's sponsor.
Today's sponsor being Cabin on the Coulee Farm. They are encapsulating the beauty of the natural Alberta prairies. They've built 3 glam sites with their hard work, blood, sweat, and tears here in central Alberta, and you can book any 3 of these glam sites anytime from May to November. It's a very big window, and if you happen to stay at any 3 of these, you should stay feeling the pride that you are staying on the #1 farm stay in Canada, according to TripAdvisor. So, beautiful trip that we advise you take.
And if you do want to take that beautiful trip, then again, go onto the website cotc.ca, scroll down to see what campsites you have available to you, starting with the cabin, which holds 6 guests, 3 bedrooms, 4 beds, and is pet friendly. Scroll on down, you have the Coulee Yurt, which is not pet friendly, but no less beautiful. It holds 5 guests, 3 bedrooms, and 3 beds. And then lastly, but definitely not least, you have the Grouse House, which holds 4 guests, 1 bedroom, 2 beds, and is also pet friendly. So again, check out the website if you guys want to book. And if you guys want a bit more of the more personal interworkings of how this business is run, then check out Cabin on the Coulee's Substack, where you guys can find videos and photos and links and more updates on even some future projects that they have coming down the line and all of that good stuff.
Yes, it's a very grassroots family-owned business, which is why our family makes a priority of it to go here annually, because it's where we get to do the tranquil home down things that we don't get to do when we're stuck in the city grind. So maybe chopping some wood, or definitely taking the time, because you're on vacation, there is no time, to read some good books. And if you guys are only listening, on screen I'm showing a photo of me and MayCee from last year's trip, where I happened to be reading a book whose author just so happens to be the guest of today's episode. So if you enjoy today's episode and you enjoy and plan on taking her advice, which is experiencing and sharing beautiful things, there's nothing more beautiful than a family experience, of which Cabin on the Coulee Farm can give you. So go to their website and book a stay.
Yeah, and so without further ado, that concludes today's sponsor, and thank you guys so much for listening. And now, let's get on with the episode.
Alrighty, hello everybody, welcome to another episode of At Home with Holmes. This doesn't have a segment name, this is just an interview, one that me and MayCee are absolutely stoked for, because this is Megha Lillywhite, and if you haven't heard us rave enough about her on our shows, we figured we have to introduce her and her brain and her ideas to the rest of you. I actually found out about Megha Lillywhite way back when in my Over to the Youth days. She spoke at the Better Way conference for World Council for Health all those years back. And so from there on, I just followed her work and her Substack. And for me and MayCee personally, we don't have a lot of young individuals that we can resonate with. We do our damnedest to resonate with other youth. As you guys know, we're involved with the UCP and all these political events. But we still overall have found the ideas of the older generations and the seniors, they hit home for us a bit easier. We have to go out of our way to understand the young mind today. But Megha and her ideas, right off the get-go, me and MayCee went, shoot, this is somebody that we understand. And so part of the reason for having her on the podcast today was because we want to get into how can we start fostering this type of thinking so we can start exploring her mind and see how we can replicate it within other youth with maybe less hormonal imbalances, especially with all of the stuff and all of the distractions that we can get on our media and then with the pharmaceutical industry. We have a lot of things to battle. And so Megha's, I'm going to dub her an expert, although I think she's too humble to dub herself that. So without further ado, MayCee, unless you want to add anything.
I don't have much to add. I kind of just wanted to say that like we like not so I don't like I hope doesn't come across rude, but we just recently read your work Girl Everlasting that you came out with. And for those that don't know Megha or not, we have recommended her book Girl Everlasting before on our show. It is a series of essays that she has written. And in it actually it says that you are actually like in your 30s if I'm not mistaken, like you are 30, yes.
Yeah, I turned 30 recently.
Yeah, okay. So that's why it's funny to me because me and Maddie like actually are still in our early 20s, but when we say like youth, it feels that way because it's less so like a you have you don't have a youthfulness in the sense of you're immature. You just have something that's quite lively to you and how you view the world. It's almost like you keep on revitalizing it
Yeah.
and finding different ways to revitalize it. And I think that that is something that is very youthful in essence, especially like for children, for example. And it resonates with us because we've been, I guess, sort of quote unquote dubbed sort of like old souls in some sense because I'm like, oh, I'm resonating at 21 like with a 30-year-old mother, and I'm like, what? I'm like, what? And I don't have children yet, so I'm like, what am I? What's going on here? So it's like there is something quite unique and beautiful about that and your perspective with your lived experience, but also how much care you put into trying to think about your environment because it seems like you've taken quite a large amount of responsibility upon yourself to keep on perpetuating something better to be surrounded in. And that's what I really appreciate. So, I guess for the first sort of question that we can get maybe starting into, it would be, I guess, an introduction to the audience as to who you are and what it is that you do. But also, then I'm kind of curious about your sort of origin stories into specifically the writing as well, because you did write an essay about how you went down like a large amount of backgrounds actually in dipping your toes in all sorts of different avenues. And I'm just curious about your story leading you all the way up to, I guess, even this interview with us today.
Um, Thank you so much for all of those kind words, and it really touches my heart that my writing was able to inspire impressive young women like you. And so it makes me happy that what I'm writing is helpful to other people. I think that I speak for many writers when I say that most writers write selfishly, uh, because we've got, an overwhelming amount of thoughts in our minds, and writing kind of helps to alleviate that burden and to organize those thoughts and put them out, at least down on paper.
Mm.
And that's the main reason that I write and why I've always written. And I think anyone who can relate to that, if you have felt that same feeling, then you're probably a writer. And so I started writing when I was 13 or 12, no, when I was 12, my dad gave me a beautiful journal, and it was so pretty that I was thinking for a while, like, what should I put in this? Because it's so pretty, I don't want
Mm.
to ruin it.
Me
And
too.
so I purposely thought of something beautiful to write so that I wouldn't ruin the journal. And so it and I still have it to this day. It's not even like one of the most expensive journals. It's probably something from the dollar store, like
Right.
looking time. But um yeah, so at like I think one of the first things I wrote was like my own fairy tales, my analysis of Harry Potter, like my diary entries of like what was happening in my life, but I had to write it in a way that was worthy of the journal.
Mm.
Mm.
And so that kind of started my journey. And then I was on Wattpad for a while, and I had so much fun writing my own like fairy stories and fiction novels and on Wattpad and connecting with lots of other people. And I was on Pixie Hollow. So I was really Gen Z in that
Mm.
grew up with the internet. Uh, when I got to university, I stopped writing and I stopped reading because the workload was so much.
Mm.
Heavy, and I was studying, I was doing an undergraduate in medical science and physiology at Western University in Canada. And I was planning to become a doctor, like every other Indian girl. It's
Wow.
like three paths, doctor, lawyer, banker, or something,
Right.
engineer.
Mm.
So, but I genuinely loved science. So I thought, you know what, this is a great pathway. And I think like what you said about me earlier, that I have a youthful energy. I actually get that quite often from a lot of people.
Mm,
And I'm not saying this to brag about myself in an arrogant way. I don't think it's related to my appearance. I think I look very typical of my age group. I think it's more related to the fact that youthfulness itself is an ability to live in and appreciate the present in a radical way. So when you spend any time with a child under the age of 7, you'll notice that they're amazed by everything and they're curious about everything. So when they see even a leaf, they'll be so excited about it, or like they'll ask questions about the simplest things in their lives. And I think that's why I really connect with children, and that's why I'm making children's books now, because I think I'm one of the types of people who have that mindset that I can relate to some 7-year-old when they ask questions about the world and they're excited about it, about learning new things. Um, Even old people who are like in their 80s, I don't know if you've had the good fortune of meeting these types of people, but I have in the past, and they also have this youthful energy when they're excited to learn new things and they're excited and they love the world. And I think that's where youthfulness really comes from. Um, and so that's the reason that I loved science, is I was excited to learn about the world. But like I spent a lot of time in hospitals. I think I did over 200 hours of observerships in hospitals in various fields, so I could see the different specialties and what they were like. And I decided when I did an observership with an internal medicine doctor in Toronto for about 2 weeks. I lived with her actually, and she only had one son. And talking to her, I could see like how much she had missed out on her son's life,
mm,
why she didn't have more children. She basically lived at the hospital even as a senior doctor. And I realized I don't want to live in a hospital.
Mm.
So I tried to pivot to like doing academia, and I really liked the idea of teaching at a university. But of course, then COVID hit, and my Substack was leaked to my PIs, and they didn't like the fact that I didn't want a potentially harmful substance that would chemically castrate me injected
Uh,
into my body.
wow.
And so, and they also saw my anti-abortion essay.
mm.
So
Oh no.
Yep, that'll do it.
That'll do it.
yeah, so that was the end of my science career. Oh, sorry, there's babies in the background. Oh gosh.
Don't ever
Sorry.
apologize for babies in the background.
Yeah, so that's when I started working with the Better Way Conference, and I was helping doctors to stand up to the Canadian government for
Mm,
unfairly punishing them for doing their job. Really giving people informed consent is a crucial aspect of the role of a good doctor. So that's why I spoke at the Better Way Conference, where I guess I met Madison. And since then, I doubled down on my Substack, and I decided that actually, a few days after the Better Way conference, I met my husband in England.
Mm.
So that worked out very nicely. Yeah, and then I had children, and I decided, you know what, I just like making beautiful things, and I'm just gonna try keep writing and making lovely books.
Now, how did your love of art, and your art history knowledge, how did that play into all of this? Because normally, in Western society, art and science are completely opposing ideas. So, how did you reconcile that?
mm,
I've always loved art. I think any um like many children are artistically inclined, so I always had sketchbooks. I was always drawing. Um, oh, sorry, my toddler has broken into the room. One second. Yeah, so um, this is why I don't do podcasting. They want to talk.
aw.
Aww.
So, yes, I was always interested in art, and I always loved beautiful things. So I was in a relationship before, and it, ended, and I was really depressed about it. So I decided to go on the internet and try to make friends and socialize and surround myself with beauty. So I created an art club online where I called it an art club, not an art class, because I wasn't an expert by any means. But
Mm.
all I did was I went on Instagram and said, okay, whoever wants to join me, this time every week, I'm just going to show you a painting and then we're just going to talk about it
Yeah.
for an hour. And I'll give you the background of like how it was made and what the story is. And a lot of people love that. I was so surprised how many people love that. And I actually had a lot of engineers on
Mm.
my art club because they said they needed that relief of
Mm.
exposure to something beautiful at the end of the day. So that taught me a lot about art and it helped me I got into painting. And then when I met my husband, um, he was the one who encouraged me and helped me to go to an online art school where I could take classes on my own time and do the assignments and have TAs give me feedback. So I did that for about 2 years, learning fine art online. And now I use that skill to create heritage children's books. So the kind that were made before all the conglomerates and monopolies took over the
Mm.
public industry and destroyed, just annihilated beautiful children's books.
Wow. Honestly, like I think that that's so insane to me that just like how you went from such a transitionary process of like, oh, I just like seeing this woman in Ontario just going like, oh, I don't want to be like so dismissed from what's going on around me. And I even love how right now your toddler's coming in. This plays into context, and you're like, I don't want to sit down and have podcasts because my toddler like my child wants me and wants to spend time with me, and I want to spend time with my. I'm like, I think that's so admirable, and it made me feel bad. I was like, oh my god, we're taking you away from your child. Um,
No, it's fine. I think that we need a balance, especially as women. I think
mm,
that like I in my the reason that I wrote is because like you, I couldn't find myself relating to many of the voices, especially the young voices that I was hearing.
mm,
So especially in the West, all we are given is the leftists who are completely deranged, completely like self-hating, child-hating, beauty-hating people. And then you have on the opposite extreme, you have the right wing, which is like it doesn't quite speak to me either.
mm,
Seems like a bit of a performance, especially when we consider what like I'm living in the Middle East right now and I meet a lot of women here and I honestly relate to them a lot better. And I because the women that I meet here, they're well educated and intelligent and they like putting effort into their appearance and they're very sweet and feminine and kind-hearted and family loving as well. So I think that there's a happy balance that is somehow being missed in our political environment for women,
mm.
that you either have to be like a completely frumpy mom who's doing nothing but, looking into her child's eyes all day, or you have to be like an investment banker or like a surgeon
Yeah.
who sees your children at all. And I think there is a happy medium that will fulfill the woman's intellectual or artistic or creative needs and social needs, but also will be beneficial to the child. I think we're all like rediscovering a more human way to exist.
Hmm. I think so. I didn't know when this question was going to come up, but this is like perfect timing. And it was my question for you then is like you finding that in the Middle East and you're relating to these women, right? That's something that you value and like you can tell because there's like it's in you, but also you're seeing it and you're resonating. You're like something here makes sense, like makes way more sense than. And I know that to some degree, and I would also like to get your perspective on this. That you did grow up in the West, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, I
So
grew up in Canada.
so the differentiation that I'm curious about is like so you did grow up in the West and now you're in the Middle East and now you're kind of meshed into a different kind of culture altogether. But what's interesting about your work though is that you're still addressing problems that are happening in the West and you're not even there. And that's why I think that's so interesting. Like so not to be mean or anything, but a part of me like instantly was like, why does she care? But not in a bad way. Like I'm like, Why do you
Yeah.
care? That's so cool that you care. Why is that?
Well, I grew up in Canada, so the West is like my home. Not like my home, it is my home. A lot of people talk about, I think this is one topic that I haven't seen anyone really cover is what happens to the assimilated child.
Mm,
Because my parents, they often still refer to India as home. And
mm,
that's there to them. That's where they grew up. That's where their cultural references, their language that they're most comfortable in, everything about it, the climate even is more at home for them. Whereas me and my siblings and I, we grew up in Canada from a very young age, and we didn't grow up in an ethnic enclave. We were completely enmeshed in Canadian culture. So, we liked Christmas and we liked Canadian literature and art. That's what we were exposed to at school.
mhm.
English is my most comfortable language. I also speak fluent French. I know all the Quebecois songs because of like field trips and all of that stuff. Um, Canadian culture is really a big part of me. And even though our prime minister says Canadian culture is just snow, the thing that melts at room temperature, I think that's ridiculous. So I think that the assimilated child, like the second gen immigrant, there are many who have become bad actors and they've assimilated too much because they also took on the leftist values that are a big feature of the West today. Um, but I think because I don't know, I think it's also like reading literature and reading good books protected me a lot. And I grew up in a very wholesome environment, so that also likely protected me from a lot of bad ideas. I think I could ask the same questions of you guys, like what happened that you turned out okay compared to the rest.
Well, I'd love to get into that on our side, but I actually think that with your parents, that's actually something that does play a large part in how me and Maddie turned out. And you talked about the wholesome environment. So I'm just wondering, like, in terms of role models and also kind of like what it is that you learned value wise from your parents that kind of helped structure the person that you started to turn yourself into and sculpt yourself into. What was that like, and what it is like, what did you take from them, what didn't you take from them, and that forming your personality?
So my mom was a working mom, but she always told me how much she regretted it, especially when we were young.
Mm,
So I really felt that. And also, I missed her a lot when she was at work. I remember missing her that, she can't do my hair in the morning or she's not there when I come home. And this is not to like disparage my mom in any way, shape, or form. She was a lovely parent. And she honestly did the best that she could. And she gave me a lot of advantages in life. But I did learn from what she regretted and what I regretted that I want to be more present when I have children. And so that's where that impulse came from. And I think that I never actually thought about it until I was finishing up my master's and I was thinking about either going to med school or doing a PhD. And then I thought, wait, if I do all this stuff, when will I have children? Like when
mm-hmm.
I'm 35. And if I have children and I have this career, when will I see them? And I think a lot of girls, as silly as this sounds, don't ask themselves these questions until much later in life.
Mm,
And I was also living at a time before the anti-feminist movement ever took off. I think I was one of the pioneering writers that helped to push back against feminism. So when I was writing on Twitter in the late 2010s, I was one of the only ones who was saying a lot of things that are said today with zero pushback. When I was saying them, I was getting death threats for it. And I
mm,
was getting mass amounts of hatred, um, rumors, etc. And so now it's actually a good thing that girls can say the exact same things that I said 10 years ago, and they get, you know, very little pushback or very little criticism for it. So the culture's definitely shifted a lot. But when I was 20, these conversations were not common at all. And also, like, keep in mind, my husband is English, and we have two very English-looking daughters. So it does make me care about the West because that is also their home
Mm.
in a deeper way than it is mine, actually.
On that note, and I didn't plan to go here with this conversation, but now that we're here talking about the West, I mean, so you grew up in Canada. Me and MayCee are still in Canada, but we're in Alberta, which is currently going through this Alberta independence push. And the thing with Canada is that a lot of people have used the UK to compare. You know, they look at what's some of the policies that's gone down in the UK, some of the censorship bills that have passed that they are now putting in Canada. Because even our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he managed the Bank of England. Now he manages the Bank of Canada. So all of these things that have kind of translated over, and how does that play in your brain? I don't know if you want to comment on Alberta independence, if you've even heard of or done any digging or anything like that, but just generally, as somebody that grew up in Canada and then having experience with the UK, how does that translate and how are you transcending above that?
I feel like I know a way that I would also want to rephrase the question, not because it was a bad one. I actually just, I want an addition to it to add to what you were talking about, Megha, is you came in to Canada like at a young age, right? But then there's also been, as Maddie's pointing to, not a very good shift of our culture at all of what's been going on in Canada. And the comparison is some of the policies and some of the, I guess, politics around what's going on in the UK transpiring as a little sort of what's happening in Canada. So I guess from your perspective of someone who came to Canada a couple like years ago, right? Because you're now a woman, but like a while ago, and now taking a look at it now, what is kind of your perspective on that? And then, yeah, you may or may not have something to touch on with regards to Alberta wanting to actually separate from Canada.
That's a great question. I'll do my best to answer it. But so when I came to Canada, my parents, their main messaging toward us was to tell us how fortunate and lucky we are to live in a beautiful country like Canada. And that was like the main thing that I heard growing up. And I didn't just internalize it, but I also saw it outside with my own senses. Because when I went back to India to visit my grandparents, I could see there was trash on the streets. It was not safe for us to go out on our own to the shops or anything like that. The women, people like rushed onto the buses. No one ever formed a queue for anything. You had to pay bribes and bits of corruption everywhere to get any kind of paperwork filed. Or there, I heard stories from relatives about how, all universities take bribes if you want to get a seat.
Hmm.
There was mass levels of racism in India, like what they call as colorism, but actually it's like casteism, I would say, where they treat you better if you have lighter skin and they treat you worse if you have darker skin. That's still the case there. So
Mm.
India, like whenever I went back, there's no like hygiene standards for the street food. I mean, if I say this, people call me self-hating. If you say it, they'll call you a white supremacist. So it seems like who then has the authority to
Mm-hmm.
criticize these things? Because what I'm talking about is not about race at all. I'm just talking about basic structures of society and behaviors of people that are either anti-civilizational or pro-civilizational. So I say that
Mm.
I like to say that my ideas are pro-civilizational ideas, and there are certain environments and factors that are necessary to allow the flourishing of each individual and a community as a whole. And I think that Western society, what in its foundations has these ideas when you read, the work of the founding fathers of the United States, or when you read essays written by the early Canadians, or even books and writing from England, from like their best thinkers and poets and essayists and philosophers. Even when you go all the way back to ancient Greece, those you can identify these pro-civilizational ideas because whenever they're applied, they help a society to prosper and they help individuals to feel safer and happier. And I think that in Canada, what's happened is they've turned an appreciation of pro-civilizational ideas and labeled it racism, labeled it white supremacy. And that's caused people to be silenced because these are really heinous allegations and and these are things that you can get fired over. These are things you can lose business over because, like all gossip, the majority of people don't take the pains to investigate whether or not this label is earned or if it's just a piece of libel, a piece of calumny. So, what I've seen in the West is that the UK has, since the 60s, increasingly put into place a lot of anti-civilizational ideas. And the same thing has been happening in North America as well. And I think that growing up with parents who constantly juxtaposed the third world to the first world for me made me appreciate just how lucky I am to live in to grow up in a society where, my brother and I could go ride our bikes by ourselves and not worry about getting kidnapped, or we go to school and we can genuinely apply for scholarships or admissions and our parents don't have to pay bribes, or I can be absolutely sure that my work is being judged based on its merit and not because and won't be discredited because I'm a woman or I'm the wrong class or I don't how much money my parents have or anything like that. So the fairness, I think, was and the safety and us also, like, they didn't beat children in the school. Like, you take that for granted. That's not true everywhere. In a lot of schools, children are not treated well. Um, so I think these things all compounded to make me appreciate the core of the Western values that I was given as a gift. And I think a lot of people take them for granted. And that's caused a lot of the leftist anti-civilizational ideas that we see to prosper because the people who promote these ideas don't realize how precarious it is to live in a nice society.
It's interesting that you say that. I watched a video and it was a experiment on mice, and this individual had given this colony of mice everything that they need for a long life. They gave them ample food, ample water, they had shelter. These mice they didn't need to lift a single finger, to take care of themselves. And as a downstream result, some of the mice started getting vain. They started obsessively grooming themselves, the male and the female mice. And then they stopped breeding with one another, and then they started fighting with one another. So it was really interesting, and the correlation, something that you kind of talk about, is like when you talk about beauty and art and goodness, these are creations, even whether it's God's creations or even, as MayCee was talking to me earlier today, children, we also imitating, in the image of God, we imitate and create life, beautiful other children. And all these mice, they didn't have to create anything because everything was just handed to them. And because they are, mice, they don't think how they can make things better from there on in. They don't have the frontal lobes that we do. And I never really thought about creativity as a necessity or as a basic survival need in order to prosper. But if you paint the mice as an analogy to our civilization, we have become vain. You've talked about it in your essays in the book, and there is a lack of attraction to one another, men and women, because we can't even agree on just men and women existing. And so, though it's an interesting correlation that I never really put together, but the necessity for creation and to pursue potential, but not just, random potential, as you've also written about in your essays. It's a purposeful potential, something that's meaningful.
So one book you'd really like that might help to further clarify your ideas is a book called On Noble Leisure, or I think it's called something else, but that's the summary title that I gave to it. It's about noble leisure. It's by a man named Joseph Piper, and he talks about how the pursuit of noble leisure is a learned thing. So people aren't really trained on how to spend their free time
Mm,
in a good way.
mm,
So we're just told that free time is meant for entertainment, but actually it used to be called recreation. So you are
hmm.
creating yourself when you're creating things. So, whether you're knitting a sweater or you're reading a beautiful book that's a bit challenging but helps you understand the world better yourself, you're painting a picture, any of these things count as noble leisure and they help to replenish you because, animal studies are great, but mice are not human and mice don't have, all animals have a need to exert and use their skills, their God-given skills. So like if a lion doesn't get the chance to hunt, he'll get really depressed. So I think something similar was happening to the mice when they didn't have to exert any of their abilities to um, sustain themselves, they also got depressed. And I think as human beings, so much of our labor, our creative labor is taken away from us. And like I think we live in such an amazing time period because we can easily just take it back. And a lot of people like to black pill about the modern world, but I'm actually quite pleased with it because if I want to learn how to make all my own dishes with pottery tomorrow, I have the free will to do that. So I think that all of the people I think girls are ahead of men in this sense. You don't get that often. People think, oh, she hates women. But no, I think girls are ahead of men in this respect. That when you go on Etsy, most of the business owners there are women
Mm.
and they're making jewelry, they're making clothes, they're even cobblers. They're people binding books in the old-fashioned way and illuminating with medieval manuscripts. So, and the fact that they can make money from it is even better. So I think that's the solution to a lot of our anxiety in the modern world is to start making beautiful and useful things.
Hmm. Well, like it's interesting because I mean, me and Maddie have been kind of saying this on various episodes, but I don't know even I got this from a Rising Tide Foundation presentation, and it was someone who was actually studying kind of like an ancient Chinese economic doctrine, and it was a very I don't know, it just stuck out to me, and what it was basically I feel like what you're talking about, that creative energy, right? That's how why sometimes even some people like of our generation don't even understand the basics of like what you just mentioned, like can you make money off of it? But that's important because if you're going to try and now transition into the realm of like economics, for example, right? You were talking about how you're looking from a civilizational lens, right? And you're like pro civilizational, what builds up people, right? And what is economics, or at least like really truly, what is the value of economics when you try to go out of your way to define it? And it's like, well, can you produce lots of people and can you improve their quality of life so that way they can have more? And can it be not a detriment to the environment that they're in, right? And then can that make them so that the way they have even more creative potential that can be unlocked, right? And I feel like when I think of that sort of doctrine that was placated, it was like people can't have sort of like creative thinking when they're so stuck on trying to feed their families, right? It's like you're talking about with this the third world example and what you actually lived through and what your parents lived through and we're trying to emphasize with you is that when those things are happening there is no person looking on the sidewalk going like wow there's trash everywhere. It's like no, they're part of putting the trash on the ground because they're trying to figure out how to just basically survive, that they're not paying attention to their surroundings and there is no creativity that's being that frees their mind to even have those ideas to observe something beautiful because it's like I have no time to look at a leaf, right? I have to put food in my child's mouth, like, and so that's what I think is like kind of something that's unfortunate and what I'm also curious about in terms of why you're not even in Canada anymore. And that might have to be with like completely different reasons. I'm assuming it's cultural for sure, but another one might be would it also have to do with some of the economic stifling? Because I know that in part our own context still living here is that economically it's not doing so well, and that I feel like that also plays a part into the degradation of our culture that we're seeing in Northern America as well. Is that, like, yes, as a developed country, there's lots of good things that we have and we shouldn't take for granted, as like what you're alluding to, but there's also things where we're stifling ourselves and our ability to free up our creative potential to feel like we're building like a tradesman would, in comparison to even what you put in your Girl Everlasting book, which is, or are you just like a factory person that's replaceable, right? And so, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that you guys ask such challenging questions because you're such smart girls. But you've touched on something really important here, which is the structure of the modern Western economy. And the structure of this economy is not meant for human beings. I mean, I'm not one of those, I'm not a Marxist. I think Marxists identified the right problem, but they came up with the wrong solution.
Fair.
Because I think that Marxism came up at a time when the factory was first introduced, and a lot of writers correctly identified that that's actually really dehumanizing. It's going to destroy artisans and craftsmen, and local culture is going to be obliterated.
Obliterated.
Obliviated works as well,
Yeah,
strangely.
you could, yeah. Both.
Yeah. So, I think that the structure of the economy is such that a few is actually quite communist because it's not a free market at all. It's just a few companies that own everything, own all of the productivity and distribution. And they're not even in Canada, they're in other countries. Um, and they have so much money that they can lobby the government to enforce laws that makes it impossible for anyone to compete with them. Um, and they can get away with selling really crappy things to us. And we have no choice because there's no competition.
Mm,
So that's not exactly free market. That's actually quite communist, but they tell us it's free market because we can't do anything about it. And that's a kind of slavery as well, or kind of oppression or tyranny. I don't know what the exact right word is,
all of them.
because it prevents the individual from profiting off of his creativity and productivity. Instead, he's forced to go and do some fake job, sending emails back and forth, moving numbers.
Mm,
Uh, like the only real jobs I think that still exist in the West are like teacher, doctor, dentist, like those are real jobs. But the other jobs, like making things like, oh, I'm a candlestick maker. That is a more real job than every single job on Bay Street in Toronto. Um, so I think that the structure of the economy has made real jobs obsolete and fake jobs the only way that you can really put food on the table. And I think that's part of the problem. I think that with AI, a lot of this bureaucracy is going to be kneecapped, which is a good thing. That's why I love AI, because finally people can easily access all of the legal jargon that blocks the individual from competing with these humongous companies. Finally, people can be their own middlemen
mm.
to get things. And so I think that will cause a huge change. And that's why there are so many government organizations who are invested in regulating AI. They say it's for safety of the people, but really it's because it's quite powerful and it's putting a lot of power in the hands of the ordinary person to present a threat to these large corporations that are running the governments, really. And I think that that's part of the reason that the economy of the West has become so stifling. Um, and as it comes to the third world, I think what you said is, if you're so concerned with feeding your family, you don't care if there's trash on the ground. I will resist that point a little bit
Yeah, please.
because This comes from, this is an idea also presented in Maslow's hierarchy that a person can't think about things like art and morality unless they've been fed and they're clothed, because and that whole argument falls apart because of the existence of everyday saints that we see all the time, people who are hungry and have little themselves, and yet they're still able to look after their environment and other people, and yet the richest people in the world are often the greediest and the worst. They help others the least.
Hmm.
So clearly having more material wealth or material security doesn't is neither necessary nor sufficient criteria for um, having an artistic soul and for producing a pro-civilizational society. I think that rather the answer is a bit more controversial about India and other countries like it. The reason that they have garbage on the ground, the reason that they don't have fair justice systems and they have bribes, etc. I think it's more to do with the morality of the society itself. And I think we take for granted that we live in a world that is founded on Christian values. So, love thy neighbor, or you have stewardship over your environment. You have to look after it. Or there's like a whole bunch of um, commands of behavior and morals that I think that if you live in a non-Christian society, you just don't have those as embedded into people's hearts and minds. So, when like I think a person who's grown up in Canada and is a Canadian, even if he's not Christian, he will pass by a piece of trash on the ground and it will bother him, and he'll pick it up and put it in a trash can. Whereas someone who has not grown up with any of those cultural um, influences on him, he will think, well, why is it my job? In fact, I'll throw my trash on here too because like this isn't mine. Why do I have to do any of this? So we take for granted the values that form the invisible infrastructure, invisible moral infrastructure of a society.
No, that's a good point. It reminded me of something that I read actually in it was Benjamin Franklin's Way to Wealth essay. I don't know if you read it because I feel like you would be the type to read that, but it does remind me of very much what you're saying, which was the whole essay was predicated on the people were really upset about overtaxation, and there was this older gentleman that they went to for some advice, and they're like, "What do we do about the overtaxation? What can we do?" And in it, it was basically Benjamin Franklin through the eyes of this, I guess, older gentleman, he's answering saying that, well, if you want to get over this over taxation, right, then you have to start cleaning up your own life. And it was like your own demonstration. And so I think that that's something like you totally reminded me of like, hey, wait a minute. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about because it was one of those like the vanity and the pride that can come with wanting to own something nice, right? It's like why do you need to do that in order to feel like a fulfilled individual, right? It's like why do you need these materialistic things? And it goes a little bit down that path as well. And then it also goes into like when you're reliant on others for like I don't know, maybe you're borrowing money and you get yourself into debt. He said the first sin is going into debt, the second sin is lying. Because in it was basically like now there's nothing wrong, I guess, with sort of like borrowing money. There's lots of nuances, so I'm not going to get into that. But in his example, it was when you are in that position where you're like, okay, I really want to get something now that I don't have, and I think it's going to be okay because I'll be able to pay it off, right? The moment that you might face a scenario where you can't, now you're in that position where you are afraid to face your creditor because you're like, oh shoot, I can't pay them back, right? And then that's when you can start to, what is it? An empty sack can't stand upright, right? And so now you're sacrificing your principles and your morals for because of the fact that you actually kind of enslaved yourself to some degree. Now, again, the nuances of why you might put yourself in that sort of position, sure, but when he was talking about that, it was him saying that it's like no man should have to feel like he cannot look another man in the face because of fear, right? And so that was basically, and it plays into the moral character first. It's like, what is it that we want to see in ourselves and consequently see from our other fellow human beings that can help us to produce actually sort of a sort of result that is more bringing forth wealth than the physical money that you attain. But granted, he also did talk about like saving, but more of the, again, the moral structure behind why would saving be important. And it might be because a gentleman on what is it, a gentleman, or sorry, no, a labor man standing up is more, I guess, mightier of some sort or honorable than a gentleman on his knees, right? And so it was just more and more of just the moral essence that comes from how you even get to, I guess, sort of a more wealthier position, and then why that would even matter in the first place, playing it into how does it help society if you're like this way.
Yeah, well, that's what I think, Megha, your work is, by my standard anyway, it's contributing to that solution, because your work, I would call it very cultural. And it is trying to raise the standard of the culture, because I think the culture has been, it's going through a lot of degradation, and the decadence is something that your work is countering. And me and MayCee, one of the things that really stuck out about your work for me, and I remember reaching out to you on Instagram way back when, is because it really reflected what I know to be the right hemisphere. And I sent you the book, The Master and His Emissary, I thought, because you were quoting all these poetry and Wordsworth, and I went, have you read this book? Because all of the words that are coming out of your mouth seem like you know the hemisphere works, and you are encouraging right hemisphere thinking, which is the creative process and experience and memory. And you were like, actually, I know a lot of the poets that McGilchrist, the author of the book, he references, because he too looks at poetry as, and the romanticism, which you have a beautiful essay on that in your book, Girl Everlasting. He refers to that as where some of the true creative potential that even the Greeks when they first started evolving and recognizing themselves, and their paintings would start, literally the portraits that they painted changed, and they would start depicting the different sides of the faces rather than just 2D. Suddenly there was depth in all of the pictures they were painting. And so that's one of the things that throughout your work really resonates, is because it really does transcend the economic potential and the disparity. When you have a right hemisphere proclivity individual, they will find their way out of that, and they will find a way to transcend whatever position they are currently in, because they are keeping in mind people in the big picture, and they understand that they don't have to do it all on their own. You can help build a community that can solve all of these problems. And when you spoke earlier, you mentioned kind of the useless jobs, and it's funny that you alluded to the left and the right being kind of redundant politically, and me and MayCee say that all the time, and it's also redundant economically when people compare communism versus fascism, because when you look at the economics, even somebody that would say Marxism is totally opposed to somebody like Adam Smith or Keynesian economics, and yet Keynesian economics and Adam Smith literally describe, well, it's supply and demand. You know, if you have a guy that's digging holes, then you have another guy to fill the holes. Both of them are getting paid to dig and fill holes. So there you go, supply and demand. But that's a useless job. There's no purpose behind it. And so even our institutions like to paint Adam Smith and Keynesian as, you know, the contrast to something like communism. But really, when you get far enough on either side of the spectrum, they end up looking the exact same. And another thing you pointed out, which actually kind of plays into the Alberta independence thing, because me and MayCee have been going to town halls, and a lot of Albertans are thinking about, if Alberta were to separate, what new values would we build our nation on? Because even if Canada once was recognized as a Christian valued nation, it's not in demonstration anymore. The depravity it knows no bounds, considering MAID and then what we're doing to our children via all of the puberty blockers and all that jazz. But the Christian values, there was a gentleman who did an Alberta Independence Town Hall, and he said we should start building a nation back on Christian values, because when he was comparing GDPs to nations that have Christianity as their baseline, and then countries that did not, and how even economically it kind of plays out. The one thing that me and MayCee had a bit of a contention with is that it doesn't account for the foreign interference. There's, the West and some of the money laundering operations, they will go into still underdeveloped countries, and some of the countries are still underdeveloped because the West and our intelligence agencies and our militaries are still
Kind of like
infiltrating and
neo-colonialism.
it's like neocolonialism.
Neo-feudalism. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least colonialism built like train tracks for people and like hospitals. Oh, like you guys are, I wish I was taking notes because there's so many amazing things you've just said. And I think that is the whole purpose of my work, and also ties in the necessity for the arts and the humanities. I come from a culture where the humanities are seen as the luxury pastime of the children of wealthy parents. But that is a very impoverished mentality, not impoverished in terms of money, but impoverished in terms of spirit. And you see this in a lot of wealthy Eastern families. They see the arts and writing and humanities as just, luxury pastimes. But really, when it comes down to it, the humanities help to describe what the telos of all our work is. What are we even aiming for? Why are we working this hard? Or like, how do we measure whether or not the work we're doing is good or bad, or useful or useless? And so when people take seriously as a culture the works of Plato and Homer and Tocqueville and Dickens and all of these amazing thinkers and writers, what that does is it gives them an end goal for what they should all be aiming for and what their work should be aimed at. And so I think when you mentioned like Christian values, yes, that is like a great starting point, and I think that is a solid pillar to think about what we should be aiming for. But I think that more is needed. And we also need a culture around that, like art, music, writing, poetry. And I think that that's why I focus my energy so much on the aspirational rather than the detraction. One, because the detraction will get you arrested. And two, because it can pull you down with the pigs in the gutters, and you start arguing things like puberty blockers are bad for kids, and suddenly your whole life and your mind is overtaken by these wicked things. Like, what's that quote? I don't know where it's from. Look long into the abyss, and the abyss looks long into you. Like, the longer you spend in the trenches, the mud will also get onto you, and it's going to affect your own quality of life and your own mind and heart. So that's why I try to focus on, okay, well, this is what we need to aim toward rather than this is
No,
bad
I
and
like that
here's
because
why.
and you mentioned it as well in your book. I'm like, I love how we are touching on it, guys. Legit, like, go read the book. But I like how the fact that because in it as well, you were saying that a lot of even the right side, right, on the, I guess, the political right, they are built on that sort of emphasis of what is bad, and they are looking at what it is that they've been subjugated again and like victimized of. And because and in some degree you look at them and you're like, well for sure, like there is some sort of victimization here going on, but it eliminates the sort of responsibility that you had of how you got there in the first place, right? And then it's more so like well, now that you've been victimized, what are you going to do about it? Like, what is your aiming towards point? Like, what do you want to work towards then? And I like how you're saying that's where sort of the creative mentality of what do you want to work towards, and like visioning, like a vision, what do you want? Like that's the question, because it's not, because you can build a sort of, I guess, community, and we have, upon the sort of this is terrible, and like, well, look what's happened to us, and like you said, the trenches, the mud, the dirt, right? Because you're down in the gutter together, and you're like, oh, like this is awful and this is terrible. But then I think that there's like a blessing and a curse in that, because of course if something's bad, then there will be some people hopefully that do come out of it and they look and they go like, well, now I know what I don't want to do, right? And that is still people looking towards what it is that they want to go towards, right? It's like, oh, okay, so puberty blockers is the example, right? It's like, oh, that's what we're doing. Well, now I know I don't want to do that, right? But it's like a little step further of like, well, why don't you want to mentally castrate children? And it actually legit good.
What do you want to do with children instead?
Like, well, what are children about, right? And like actually taking a look and observing them, going like, what are the beauties of them that I don't want to see gone, because clearly this is bothering me internally and this sucks, right? It's like, oh, we're mentally castrating children, right? But it's like, well, what do I want to take from that for even myself, so that hopefully that keeps propagating throughout the generation? Because I just want to say this like quick point is that even your own demonstration right now, and like of course like we haven't met each other in person, that's a totally different game, like ball game, right? But I love the fact that like even your demeanor and your demonstration and your vocabulary and your ability to just sequentially say things in an articulate manner, and I know that that's something that you have to work really hard at. Like I wouldn't even presume that this is like that's an easy thing for you. That's something that always will have to be worked upon, but you've done a fantastic fucking job. Because I'm like, that's what we're trying to aspire to, is individuals that they have that sort of like, if I could compliment you even further, which I will.
I told you in the email you would be venerated.
I already said, I do feel like you, when you know those, I guess, sort of cliches of like the sort of women that you feel sort of gravitational warmth towards. Well, I feel that with you. I definitely feel like you're emanating that, and I just want to say that the acknowledgement of how hard you've worked to got there is not bygone on my brain. I know not everybody wakes up that way. We all are born like mentally ill. So
I think Twitter like, if you want to know how bad it is for you, it pushes me to the limits and brings out my, terrible side as well. And I spent a decade learning how to manage it. And I think I'm like a professional at it now. But it's not for the weak. And if you find yourself online and saying like, wow, am I really this bitchy, snarky person? No, you're not. It's just, that's the medium, and it's pushing you that way. And and it will take a lot of work and skill and patience and personal development to not be pushed that way. So, and I think the articulation, it mainly comes from reading really good writers.
Yes.
Dude, I've been in the middle of Frankenstein because I wasn't assigned it in school, so I'm picking it up of my own volition. And I am Googling words every 2 pages. It is absolutely insane. But I really appreciated
And then an 18-year-old wrote that.
Right?
An 18-year-old
I'm
girl.
23. I'm stupid compared to her.
Yes, and it was done to you on purpose, because when reading levels were introduced in the late 80s, it was with the express purpose to allow publishing companies to make more money while screwing over children. So it wasn't just happened to an entire generation of people. So it's not your fault.
Thanks, Megha. And I want to, on that, I don't want to leave people without where to obsess in your work as much as MayCee and I do. And I do encourage people to get the book, because what we've been talking about, all of this is the cultural aspiration and the aspiration for a better mindset, how to manage. And this is the funny thing about relationships, is that when you read the title of her book, Girl Everlasting, on romance, love, and virtue, but on the back it says, leave the tower, enter the world. And it's not just a book for women, and that's actually funny because
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, it's not just a book for women, even though she did write, and I didn't know this, I had bought your book, and then me and MayCee had to buy another copy because we have some young ladies in our world who definitely need some better reading and to aspire to be a bit more mature in their pursuits. So we recommended this one after reading it, because it's, if you want to figure out how to kind of hone your mind and your goals as a woman, this is it. But this is also how to consider the world of men. And you have another book somewhere.
Bro epistemology.
Bro epistemology.
Interesting titles. I like them. I really like them.
I think it was quoted like how to be a Chad or something.
I know. Like, that is like, if that's not an appeal to the Western mind, I don't know what is. And I actually thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I picked it up for our brother on Christmas. Even though I hadn't read it, I had read Girl Everlasting, and I thought there's gonna be stuff in there that he likes. There's no two buts about it. And he actually said today he finished it, and he said, "I actually recommend that to you girls. It's a solid read." And I originally got it for Sebastian so he could kind of pick it apart because it's
Because he's a guy. It's written by a woman.
and
So
it's
we're
written
like,
by a
well, what do you
woman.
think?
Exactly. So I thought, because it's very interesting all the time in, the left world, and there is an argument to be made for it, but you are also, juxtaposed to it that men cannot understand women and women can understand men because they're not women and we're not men. And yet you have written a book on men, and it resonated with a man. So we'll have to have you on again in the future because
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on and talk to you guys.
Oh, yeah, because I have like so many more questions to ask you.
Yeah, we can schedule another one. I'll be in touch with you guys, but I think my babies need me now. So
for people to find Megha Lillywhite, she is on a Substack. This is where you can get her books, follow her Twitter. You can go to her classical ideals. And this is one that it is money well spent when people subscribe to this, because this is how you could better look at children, better look at your own mind. Because she specializes, in my opinion, on relationships and the negotiation of, it is irrespective of gender. Both men and women will benefit from looking and understanding Megha's work, because it's generally hidden messages on how to understand your brain, and she does it beautifully. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for making the time in your very busy schedule with your two wee ones.
thank you so much for having me and for all of the kind words.
Great. And with that, that is At Home with Holmes.
Thank you, everybody.